Imagine doing everything you were told to do with money. You work hard. You save a portion of your income. You put your savings in a bank account, believing that your money is safe and slowly growing. But what if something else is happening behind the scenes? What if the value of your savings is actually shrinking quietly, year after year? And what if one of the main reasons behind that loss is something most people rarely think about? Interest rates. Most people believe interest rates help their savings grow, but in many cases, the way interest rates interact with the financial system can slowly reduce the real value of the money you worked so hard to save. And once you understand how this mechanism works, you start to see the financial system very differently. The common belief about savings for generations. People were taught a simple financial rule: save money, put it in the bank, earn interest. This idea created the belief that saving automatically makes your money grow over time. And technically, that is true. Banks do pay interest on savings accounts, but there is something important that most people overlook. What matters is not just how much money you have in your account. What really matters is what that money can actually buy. And this is where the silent impact of interest rates begins to appear. The hidden problem? Let's imagine a simple example. You save $10,000 in a bank account. The bank pays you 2% interest per year. At first glance, it looks like your savings are growing. After 1 year, your balance increases. But now imagine that during the same year, the cost of living increases by 5%. Food becomes more expensive. Housing becomes more expensive. Energy becomes more expensive. In other words, prices across the economy rise faster than the interest your savings are earning. Your bank account balance may be slightly larger, but the purchasing power of that money is actually smaller. This is the silent effect that many people never notice. How interest rates shape the economy. Interest rates are one of the most powerful forces in the financial system. They influence how much people borrow. They affect how businesses invest. They shape the behavior of entire financial markets. Central banks use interest rates as a tool to control economic activity. When interest rates are low, borrowing becomes cheaper. People take more loans. Businesses invest more. Economic activity increases. But when interest rates rise, borrowing becomes more expensive. Spending slows down. Investment slows down. Economic growth can weaken. Because of this, interest rates influence almost every part of the economy, including the value of your savings. The silent effect on savings. When interest rates remain very low for long periods of time, something unusual happens. Borrowers benefit, but savers suffer. Low interest rates mean that banks offer very small returns on savings accounts. At the same time, inflation may continue increasing the price of goods and services. This creates a situation where savers are slowly losing purchasing power every year. And because this process happens gradually, many people do not notice it happening. Their account balance looks stable, but the real value of that money is quietly shrinking. Why this happens? This dynamic exists because the financial system is largely designed to support borrowing and investment. Modern economies rely heavily on credit. Loans allow businesses to expand. Mortgages allow people to buy homes. Debt fuels economic growth. To support this system, central banks often maintain interest rates at levels that encourage borrowing. But those same low interest rates can reduce the return on traditional savings, which means people who simply store money in bank accounts may find their wealth slowly losing value over time. The role of inflation. Inflation plays a major role in this process. Inflation represents the general increase in prices across the economy. When inflation rises faster than interest earned on savings, the real value of money declines. This means that even though your bank account balance may be increasing slightly, the purchasing power of that money is decreasing. Over long periods of time, this effect can become very significant. $10,000 today may buy far less in the future. if inflation continues rising while savings interest remains low. Why most people don't notice one of the reasons this problem goes largely unnoticed is psychological. People tend to focus on the number in their bank account. If that number increases, even slightly, it feels like progress. But the economy does not measure wealth in numbers alone. It measures wealth in purchasing power. How much food can your money buy? How much housing can it buy? How much energy can it buy? When inflation rises faster than savings interest, the answer to those questions becomes smaller over time. The bigger system at work, when you step back and look at the larger financial system, you begin to see how these forces interact. Central banks adjust interest rates to stabilize the economy. Financial markets react to those changes. Banks adjust their lending and deposit rates accordingly, and all of these changes ripple through the entire economy. Borrowers respond. Investors respond. Consumers respond. And somewhere within that complex system sits your savings account, affected by forces most people rarely see. Why understanding this matters? Understanding how interest rates and inflation interact can completely change how people think about saving money. Saving is still important, but simply storing money without understanding how economic forces affect its value can create unexpected outcomes. Financial awareness allows people to make more informed decisions about how they protect and grow their money, and it reveals something important about the financial system. Money does not exist in isolation. It exists within a constantly changing economic environment. How low interest rates change saving behavior. When interest rates remain very low for long periods of time, something interesting begins to happen. People slowly stop seeing savings accounts as a meaningful way to grow their money. Think about it. If your bank pays 1% interest per year, but inflation is rising 3, 4, or even 5%, then keeping money in a savings account begins to feel pointless. Your money technically grows, but the cost of living grows faster. Because of this, many people begin looking for alternatives. They move money into stocks. They move money into real estate. They move money into other investments that promise higher returns. This behavior is not accidental. It is a direct result of the interest rate environment created by the financial system. Low interest rates push people away from traditional savings and toward riskier assets. The risk created by low interest rates at first. This shift may seem positive. More people investing, more money flowing into financial markets. But there is another side to this dynamic. When too much money flows into financial markets, asset prices can rise rapidly. Stock markets can surge, real estate prices can rise. Speculation can increase. And sometimes, this environment can lead to the formation of financial bubbles. In other words, low interest rates do not just influence savings. They can reshape entire markets. The connection between interest rates and bubbles when borrowing becomes cheap. Investors gain access to easier capital. Cheap money allows more people to enter financial markets. More demand pushes asset prices higher, and rising prices attract even more investors. This cycle can create a feedback loop. Prices rise. More investors join. Prices rise even more, until eventually, the market reaches levels that may not be sustainable. At that point, even small changes in interest rates can have dramatic consequences. If interest rates suddenly increase, borrowing becomes more expensive. Investors may begin selling assets, and markets can correct rapidly. This is one of the ways interest rates influence the broader financial system. Why central banks use interest rates. Central banks understand how powerful interest rates are. That is why interest rates are one of their primary tools for managing economic stability. If inflation rises too quickly, central banks may increase interest rates to slow borrowing and reduce spending. If economic growth slows too much, central banks may lower interest rates to encourage borrowing and investment. These decisions affect the entire economy. They influence housing markets, they influence stock markets, and they influence the value of savings. Even if most people never follow central bank announcements, those decisions can still affect their financial future. Why this matters for your money: when you combine all these factors together, you begin to see the bigger picture. Interest rates are not just numbers discussed in economic news. They shape the financial environment in which your money exists. They determine how easy it is to borrow. They influence how markets behave. And quietly, they affect the real value of your savings. Understanding this dynamic does not mean that saving money is useless, but it does mean that understanding the financial system is essential, because once you understand how interest rates influence the economy, you begin to see why your money behaves the way it does. How savings used to work. To really understand why interest rates affect savings today, it helps to look at how saving money worked in the past. Decades ago, interest rates on savings accounts were often much higher. In some periods, banks offered 5%, 7%, or even higher returns on deposits. At those levels, keeping money in a bank account could genuinely increase purchasing power over time. Your savings were not only growing in numbers, but also keeping pace with the rising cost of living. For many households, the bank was a reliable place to store wealth while earning a meaningful return. But the structure of modern financial systems has changed. Over time, interest rates have often remained much lower than they were in the past, especially during long periods of economic stimulus. This change has slowly altered the role of traditional savings accounts. Why money behaves differently today in the modern economy. Money flows constantly through a global financial system. Banks lend to businesses. Businesses invest in expansion. Governments issue debt. Financial markets react to interest rate policies. All of these forces interact with one another. When interest rates remain low, money moves faster through the system because borrowing becomes easier. This encourages economic activity, but it also reduces the reward for simply holding money in a savings account. Instead of rewarding savers, the system tends to favor borrowing and investing. This does not mean saving is wrong, but it does mean that money sitting still may behave differently than many people expect. The financial system today rewards movement and investment more than passive savings. The long-term effect on purchasing power, the real impact of interest rates, becomes clearer over long periods of time. A small difference between inflation and savings interest may not seem significant in a single year, but over 10 years, 20 years, or even longer, that difference compounds. If inflation rises 3% each year while savings grow at 1%, the purchasing power of that money slowly erodes. What your savings could buy years ago may require much more money today. This gradual erosion is what makes the effect so difficult to notice. There is no sudden loss, no dramatic event. Instead, the value of savings changes slowly, year after year, as economic forces reshape the purchasing power of money. And that is why understanding interest rates is so important. Because even when nothing dramatic appears to happen, the financial system is constantly influencing the real value of the money you save. Conclusion: interest rates influence far more than most people realize. They shape borrowing, they shape investment, and quietly, they shape the real value of the money people save. While bank balances may appear stable, the purchasing power behind those numbers can slowly change over time. Understanding how interest rates interact with inflation and the broader financial system helps reveal the hidden forces affecting personal wealth. And once you begin to see those forces clearly, the financial system starts to make a lot more sense.